Andres from AA Sports. Major news. We now know who Mexico will play against in the 2026 FIFA World Cup. The group stage draw has concluded and Mexico's games are just about confirmed, with the exception of the European playoffs. With that, let's analyze Mexico's group from the perspective of the Mexico national team. Before we go further into the video, leave a like and subscribe to support the channel, and also stay tuned in for my full World Cup analysis and predictions for every group in the tournament. That video will come after March when all the final qualifiers have concluded and we know all 48 teams. With that, major news, Mexico will play in Group A with South Africa, South Korea, and the winner of the UEFA qualifying playoff path D between Denmark, North Macedonia, Czech Republic, and Ireland. Mexico will play the opening game of the 2026 World Cup versus South Africa in Estadio Azteca in La Ciudad de Mexico. For their second game, Mexico will play versus Korea in Guadalajara, and their final group stage game will also be in Estadio Azteca against the winner of playoff D from UEFA, which will either be, again, Denmark, North Macedonia, Czech Republic, or Ireland. They will play one of those four European teams. A very interesting group for Mexico, and one where they definitely got lucky in the draw. They fortunately did not get drawn into the same group with a team like Norway, who arguably nobody wants to play right now with their strong offensive front, or Colombia, who finished second in the Copa America. Mexico, fortunately, did not get the group of death for 2026. I think Mexico's games, while they will not be easy, are still winnable for the team. I'll explain why I have this opinion. Starting off with the opening game of the 2026 World Cup, which will be held in Estadio Azteca, Mexico versus South Africa. The last time Mexico played against South Africa was in the opening game of the 2010 World Cup, where it ended in a 1-1 draw. However, Mexico also beat South Africa in 2021 in the Tokyo Olympics, and that result was a 3-0 win for Mexico. For South Africa right now, they do have a very strong offense that scored 15 goals in their World Cup qualifying campaign. So when considering this aspect, I do think Mexico will likely have to score at least 2 goals to win the game, because it's very possible they concede at least 1 goal to South Africa. However, South Africa also has shown major flaws. During their World Cup qualifiers, South Africa also had a win versus Lesotho revoked, and that game ended in what looked to be a 2-0 win for South Africa. FIFA later stripped them of this result, and it ended up being a forfeited loss for fielding an ineligible player who should have been suspended for the game due to accumulated yellow cards. Their qualifying campaign was also very inconsistent. One game they would win by 2 or 3 goals and were clearly the better team. And then the next they massively underperform against Rwanda. So their defense has had its errors and still has its notable weaknesses. And while South Africa can play well, particularly on offense, they are still an inconsistent side, and that inconsistency, I think, will hurt them. Another factor to consider is that this game will be played in Estadio Azteca in Mexico City, which is at a very high elevation at 2,200 meters above sea level. I don't like South Africa's chances in higher elevation, which they are not accustomed to playing in. Estadio Azteca is known to be a tough away atmosphere to play in because of the altitude, and I think this will only make Mexico feel more in their element. This is a game I think Mexico will win. As for the second game, Mexico versus South Korea in Guadalajara, I think this could be a game that ends in a draw, just like how they drew 2-2 in September. South Korea is possibly the toughest opponent for Mexico in this group because they have brilliant individual players like Sung Hyung-min, Hwang In Baum, Lee Kang-in. And because of this, I do have Korea also advancing out of this group and going to the round of 32. However, they are super reliant on these individually talented players. They're super reliant on them to be the main playmakers and the beating heart of the team. If these star players if they're not in good form or in the worst case scenario, get injured and are unable to play, South Korea have a very noticeable drop in performance. And while you can argue Mexico is the same way without Raul Jimenez and Gilberto Mora right now, Korea are more flawed defensively in comparison, as we saw in their 5-0 loss versus Brazil in October. With that, Korea is the toughest game, but still one where Mexico can get a good result, because if they maintain a strong defense like they have and hold Korea scoreless or to only one goal, if Mexico is able to crack Korea's defense and exploit their flaws on that side of the ball, I think Mexico will do well in this game. As for the possible teams that they will face from UEFA the UEFA playoffs pathway D, starting with North Macedonia, they have only won 3 of their last 10 games, and 2 of their wins came against a very weak and smaller Liechtenstein national team. Outside of that, they have mostly just relied on playing 100% on the defensive end just to try not to lose, but doing nothing to win. And if playing 100% defense-first strategy doesn't work for North Macedonia, it can get really ugly for them, as we saw in their last World Cup qualifying group game versus Wales, where they lost 7-1. Should Macedonia qualify, I think this is a game Mexico can and should win as well. In terms of the Czech Republic, this is another team that, while they got a good draw result versus Croatia, has really underperformed outside of that. They only managed to get a 1-0 win versus San Marino, the worst national team in the world and the lowest in FIFA's world rankings, which is not a good look for them. They also had an ugly loss versus the Faroe Islands, and their only convincing wins in their group in their World Cup qualifiers so far have been against Montenegro and a weak Gibraltar team. With the Czech Republic having really underperformed since the 2024 UEFA Euro tournament, should they somehow manage to qualify for 2026, Mexico, I think, is still a better team. And while Mexico has had its own flaws and problems recently, they are in a much better state than the Czech Republic. Mexico should win this game should they play against the Czech Republic. As for Denmark, I think they are one of the tougher teams. However, they completely bottled their last 2 qualifying games, including an ugly draw versus Belarus. If they qualify, I definitely look for Denmark to do all they can to be competitive. But after being eliminated in the group stage in 2022 and barely advancing to the round of 16 in the 2024 Euros, without winning a group game in the 2024 Euros, I do think there are more doubts right now with Denmark than there are with Mexico. It will depend on what state of form Denmark is in. And because of that, I think Mexico can get a good result from this game as well. As for Ireland, they had a very poor start to their World Cup qualifying campaign, including a 2-1 loss to Armenia. However, they have been clutch in their final 3 games, winning all 3 of them to make the playoff round of qualifiers. They were able to win 2-0 versus Portugal and throw Cristiano Ronaldo completely out of his element and get a last-minute winning goal versus Hungary. With that, Ireland are arguably the team in the best form at the right time in this UEFA playoff path D. However, should they qualify for the World Cup and play versus Mexico, look to see whether or not a lack of experience on the world stage catches up to Ireland and hurts them, given that they have not qualified for the World Cup since 2002. This is why, should Ireland qualify for the World Cup and Mexico face them, I do think Mexico has an advantage that could result in them winning, as experience on this stage also matters and can play a big factor. Another thing to consider that I think benefits Mexico against whichever of these four European teams they face is the fact that they are playing in Mexico, not only in front of their home crowd, but that this game will also be in the high altitude of Estadio Azteca. Playing at high altitude is very demanding physically, and Denmark, Ireland, North Macedonia, and Czech Republic are not accustomed to that. While Mexico, they are accustomed to it. This Estadio Azteca is their home stadium. So this is another factor that I think favors Mexico, and I am not sure how well any of these four European teams will do versus Mexico in this high altitude environment that they rarely play in. Overall, a very interesting group for Mexico. While it is not the easiest group by any means, it is also not the group of death, which will make it a very interesting Group A for Mexico that I think they can win. Now that we know who Mexico will play against in the group stage, I am even more excited for these games. I cannot wait for Mexico's games in the 2026 FIFA World Cup, starting with the opening game of the tournament versus South Africa in the iconic Estadio Azteca. Andres from AA Sports, that will be all for this video. Leave your opinion on Mexico's group stage draw for the World Cup in the comments section. Leave a like and subscribe to support the channel, and also stay tuned in for my full World Cup analysis and predictions for every group. That video will come after March, when all the final qualifiers have concluded and we know all 48 teams that will be competing in the tournament. Also, stay tuned in for much more Mexican football content for both the men's and women's Mexico national teams. With that, thanks for watching and listening. Viva Mexico!